So in all of our videos, we have been leading up to the Swadeshi movement, right? And almost in the last 4 or 5 videos, we have been talking about the lead up to the Swadeshi movement as the first true mass movement. The Swadeshi movement had its genesis in the decision of the British to partition Bengal, which publicly came to be known by December 1903. So the genesis of Swadeshi movement had been in the decision to partition Bengal. Remember that Bengal meant not just today's West Bengal. Bengal included everything after Uttar Pradesh till the beginning of Assam, right? So it was a very huge area. And this huge area was becoming difficult for the British to manage. So they wanted to partition. That is what they said. But there were different reasons for the partition of Bengal. We will look at it later. So this decision of partition of Bengal led to the Swadeshi movement. Thus began the anti-partition movement that was to become a part of the larger all-encompassing Swadeshi movement. Although various authors define the Swadeshi movement and its timeline in different ways, we can stick with Bipin Chandra's way of looking at the Swadeshi movement, that is, through the representative anti-partition movement. There was no doubting the fact that Bengal, with a population of 78 million, about a quarter of the total population of British India, had indeed become administratively unwieldy. That is, it was difficult to administer, but the real motive for the partitioning of Bengal lay elsewhere. It was a very simple political motive. Indian nationalism was gaining in strength, and the two nerve centers were Bombay and Bengal. Bengal was the most aggressive of the two and intellectually forward in addition to its massive population. Bombay means the present state of Maharashtra and Gujarat were earlier known as Bombay, the princely state, right? So Curzon, the viceroy at the time of partition and a man of great vice, said the partition was an attempt to dethrone Calcutta from its position as the center from which the Congress party is manipulated throughout Bengal and indeed throughout India. So they wanted to slow down the Congress, they wanted to slow down the Indian national movement. The nerve centers were Bombay and Bengal, but Bengal was the more aggressive one. So they wanted to strike at the heart of Bengal. Risley, the Home Secretary at the time, he said this more bluntly: Bengal united is power. Bengal divided will pull several different ways. This is what the Congress leaders feel, and their apprehensions are perfectly correct. And they form one of the great merits of this particular scheme. One of our main objectives is to split up and thereby weaken a solid body of opponents to our rule. The British by the early 1900s had begun looking at Congress as a potential enemy. So they wanted to weaken the Congress, split Bengal, and weaken the nationalist movement. Curzon was very clear in his vision and the way he wanted the partition to be handled. There was going to be no tiptoeing at all. It was going to be a brazen division of Bengal, and any opposition or furor over it was to be crushed with indiscriminate and disproportional use of force. Quoting Curzon in a letter to the Secretary of State, if we are weak enough to yield now, we shall not be able to dismember or reduce Bengal again. And you will be cementing and solidifying a force already formidable and certain to be a source of increasing trouble in the future. The partition was planned to be imposed in such a way so as to reduce the Bengalis to a minority in their own land. Under the partition of Bengal, Bengal proper was to have 17 million Bengalis and 37 million Hindi and Odia speaking people. But division along the linguistic lines was only the secondary agenda. The primary agenda was to split up Bengal into Hindu majority and Muslim majority regions. The policy of propping Muslim communalists against the Congress and the national movement achieved crystallization with this participation. Curzon especially was obsessed with this idea. He kept on dangling the bait of a Muslim dominated region to the Muslim leaders. And the communal Muslim leaders jumped at it without much thought. As soon as the news of partition became known, newspapers like the Bengali of Surendranath Banerjee, Hitabadi and Sanjeevani launched a powerful campaign against the partition proposals. Dhaka, Mymensingh, and Chittagong erupted, and over 500 protest meetings were organized within 2 months. Pamphlets containing a detailed critique of the partition proposals were distributed all over Bengal. An interesting development was that even some of the big zamindars joined the Congress and other leaders in the fight against the partition against the British rule in general. Women, students, and a large section of the urban and rural population of Bengal became actively involved in politics for the very first time. The Swadeshi period was the epitome of the moderate phase of the Indian national movement. Petitions, memoranda, speeches, public meetings, press campaigns held full sway. Remember this, that the Swadeshi movement is said to be one of the best phases of one of the best moderate phases of the Indian national movement. The extremist part would come later with Tilak. Right now, it was a moderate phase. The objective was to educate people and build political awareness amongst hitherto uneducated and illiterate rural and urban Indians. It was the perfect opportunity to build in people a sense of confidence and patriotism. And to a good extent, the moderates were successful in doing this. Something Abdul Rasul, president of the Barisal Conference of 1906, said struck the chord perfectly. What we could not have accomplished in 50 or 100 years, the great disaster, that is, the partition of Bengal, has done for us in 6 months. Its fruits have been the great national movement known as the Swadeshi movement. We will continue with the Swadeshi movement in the next video. Thank you.